Chapter 164. Seeing Xin Miao in a daze, Bai Lu was afraid of delaying time and reminded, "Young lady, this hairpin looks good. This servant will help you put it on." Xin Miao then recovered to her senses and followed Bai Lu's intention. At the end, Shuang Jiang helped her put some rouge on her cheeks before it was considered over. Guyu held up a lotus green rabbit fur cloak and draped it over her before smiling. "Young lady is really good looking. Foreign will definitely like it when she sees it." Outside the door, Luo Shuiyin and Shin Xian were waiting outside. Xin Xiu pulled off a piece of leaf and said, "Why does mother not let younger sister go to the bestowed box to find clothes and jewelry to wear? This will save a lot of trouble." "What do you know?" Luo Shuiyin said in a bad mood. "Since the bestowment of materials, when would one see ready-made clothes? Even if there were ready-made clothes, who knows if it was worn by an imperial concubine? I dare not let Jiao Jiao wear it. As for jewelry, forget about it. Jiao Jiao can wear whatever she likes, and it is better not to interfere." Xin Miao had always liked tacky clothes, and this point was a headache for Luo Shuiyin. No matter how Luo Shuiyin persuaded, Xin Miao was unable to abandon her love for gold and silver jewelry. Thus, after a long time, Luo Shuiyin got used to it. The looks were all pink and could not be taken seriously. Luo Shuiyin herself came from a military family, and even though she was shrewd and beautiful, her dressing was more heroic and had the meaning of a heroine. Shinshio stuck out his tongue and said softly, "If younger sister wear gold and glitter this time." Before his voice landed, one heard a creak sound and the door was pushed open. Younger sister." Shinshio opened his mouth and stared at Xin Miao like a fool without speaking. The young female was wearing a purple silk dress and a lotus green rabbit fur cloak. The fluffy rabbit fur was piled up under her neck, making that small face look like it was only the size of a palm. She had a fair complexion, and when she wore the lotus green color, it did not seem dark at all and instead made her look extremely noble. Her bright eyes and white teeth had a light and breezy attitude. The young female's posture was delicate, but what attracted one's attention was her quiet and noble posture. Every move seemed to have a faint majesty. Luo Shuiyin and Shan Xian stared blankly. In an instant, it was as if they could see past this young girl to the back of the throne room and the noble golden phoenix under the heavy palace walls. They were even inferior to the golden phoenix. It was because Shen Miao used to wear gold and silver that the more simple she was, the more noble she looked, and that kind of quiet attitude was something that they had never seen before. Luo Shuiyin unconsciously caressed her chest. Because she came from the Northwest Desert, after marrying Shin Xian and coming to the Ding capital, she was often ridiculed by the noble ladies here for being vulgar and lacking in etiquette. Luo Shuiyin herself had secretly invited a Momo over to learn, but even if she could learn it, she was unable to learn that kind of refined elegance of an aristocratic family, thus she gave up. Now her daughter looked more noble and dignified than any noble female in the Ding capital. How could she not be pleasantly surprised? It was still Shin Xian who broke the silence first. He looked up and laughed a few times, and when he looked at Xin Miao again, his eyes were filled with pride and smiles. "The Shin family has a daughter who has just grown up. My Jiao Jiao is now also a great beauty." His words were extremely rough and provoked Luo Shuiyin to glare at him fiercely. When she turned her head, she saw the guards from the army that Xin Xiu had brought back, and they were also staring at Xin Miao. She could not help but feel a trace of pride before saying, "Never mind. Let us board the carriage first. It would not be good to be late." Finishing, she pulled Shan Miao and spoke to her intimately. Shen Miao was not used to being treated as a child like this, but when she saw Shin Xian's and Shan Xiu's doting eyes, she paused for a moment. After all, in her father, mother, and older brother's eyes, she was still that Shan Jiao Jiao. Ren Yun noticed the begonia hairpin on Shan Miao's head and even smiled. "Jiao Jiao's hairpin is really beautiful. Did you pick it yourself?" Chapter 165. Xin Miao vaguely responded, and when she walked to the door, she saw that there were already 2 carriages parked there. Xin Gui and Shan Wan stood outside, and when they saw Xin Miao and entourage walking over, their gazes were somewhat unnatural. These days, Shin Xian did not have a good expression towards the 2 brothers, and no matter how they explained, he would not listen. Even the daily greetings to old Shin Foreign, Luo Shuiyin was sloppy as though it was a routine which almost made old Shin Foreign faint from anger. Eldest brother. Shin Wan was more tactful and greeted Shin Xian with a smile. Shin Xian made an N sound from his nose and walked to his own carriage before saying to Shin Miao, Foreign, Jiao Jiao, both of you enter first. Shin Xian and Shen Xiu did not have the habit of riding a carriage, so they followed the carriage and rode horses outside. Being left out like this, Shin Gui and Shun Wan's faces were not good and a trace of anger flashed in Shun Gui's eyes. One of the other two carriages opened the curtains and revealed Shan Yu's and Shin Rochio's faces. Shin Yu said softly, Does fifth younger sister want to sit in the same carriage with us? This carriage is big enough and eldest Shun can fit. No need. Luo Shuiyin said with a cold face, One's own carriage, one can sit at ease. Shin Miao almost wanted to applaud Luo Shuiyin in her heart. Previously, Luo Shuiyin did not have any discord with the other two households, and she had a straightforward and warm personality, thus no one had seen such a mean side of her. One had to know that on the battlefield, Luo Shuiyin was even more ruthless when facing the enemy. Chen Rochio's and Shun Yu's goodwill did not have any effect on her. In the other carriage, Shen Qing and Ren Wanyun were also listening to the movements outside. Chen Qing's complexion was still somewhat pale, but she held onto Ren Wanyun's hand tightly and unconsciously used her strength, causing Ren Wanyun to cry out in a low voice. When Chen Qing let go of her hand, Ren Wanyun's wrist showed scratches from her nails. Ren Wanyun did not have the mind to care about her own hand as she pulled Shen Qing into her embrace and felt that Shen Qing's body was slightly trembling. Qing'er, Ren Wanyun softly comforted. I must kill her. In her embrace, Shen Qing gritted her teeth and said. She had gradually regained her senses and recalled the terrifying encounter that night in Wulong Temple. And all of this was thanks to Shen Miao. What was even more terrifying was that she was already pregnant and the child in her stomach could not be aborted. Otherwise, she might not be able to be a mother for the rest of her life. Thinking of the suffering that she had suffered, Chen Qing couldn't wait to let Shin Miao feel the pain that she had suffered. No, she should let Shin Miao suffer 10 times the pain. Mother will take revenge for you. Ren Wanyun's heart felt like it was being stabbed by a knife and could not wait to turn into a wolf and bite off Shan Miao's throat. Shin Qing's tearful complaint was like a knife stabbing into her heart. Whenever she faced Shin Qing, she would always think of that night. She was originally next door, but she chose to stand by and watch. I will take revenge for Qing'er, Ren Wanyun muttered. In another carriage, Shin Yu and Shin Rochio were sitting face to face. Just now when she was reprimanded by Luo Shuiyin, Shin Yu was somewhat displeased. Deep in her bones, she looked down on Luo Shuiyin, that kind of vulgar martial artist, and now that she was being ridiculed by her own vulgar martial artist, she had a stomach full of anger. Yuer. Chun Rochio gently frowned. How many times have I told you that you do not need to care about this kind of person? Why lose your bearing because of her? Mother, I just cannot bear to see it. Shin Yu looked at her palms. Shun Miao used to treat us respectfully, but now that eldest Bo's family has returned, she also put on such an arrogant attitude. A dog that relies on its master's power. If this is not done deliberately for us to see, then what is it? In her words, there was a sense of jealousy that even she did not have. Chapter 166. This little bit of jealousy was caught by Chen Rochio. She looked at her slender and elegant daughter and sighed. I have taught you before that no matter what, you must maintain your calm. It seems that you are still too young and unable to keep your composure and advance too rashly. After a pause, Chen Rochio continued, You do not need to see Shin Miao as important. Now the first household and second household are in a deadlock. Shin Miao had offended your second Shin, so your second Shin will definitely seek revenge. When Shin Yu heard it, she looked at Chen Rochio. But these days, second Shin did not do anything to Shin Miao. Chen Rochio was slightly startled. It was true that Ren Wanyun had been dealing with Shin Miao for a long time, but after such a long time, not only did Ren Wanyun not gain any benefits, she even went for wool but came home shorn and made a lot of mistakes. Now Shin Miao had waited for Shan Xian. It was fine if it was other people, but Ren Wanyun, who had always been shrewd and experienced, was able to tame all the concubines in the inner courtyard, but she was actually unable to win against a young lady. This was somewhat strange. After a moment, Chunrochio put away the surprise in her heart and said, "It is precisely because your second Shin had not succeeded all along that your second Shun's temper is now close to a violent rage. So in order to deal with Shun Miao, she would definitely take the risk out of desperation and use all her strength. At this time, even with your eldest beau's protection, Shun Miao would not be able to escape even if she had wings." Xinyu listened in a daze but seemed to understand something and said, "As such, we only need to sit down and watch the show." "Correct." Chunrochio said, "This is what I want to teach you. In the inner courtyard, if you cannot take action, then do not take action. If you can use other things to achieve your goal, then do not take action personally. If we make good use of it, we will be able to benefit from it effortlessly." Thanking Mother for the teachings, Xinyu sat up straight. "I understand." They were still talking happily, unaware that Luo Shuiyan's carriage had already left them far behind. Shen Xiao and Shen Xian rode on the tall horse, and along the way, the commoners who recognized them all looked at them with admiration. The ominous name of the mighty general had already spread far and wide among the people. In the carriage, Luo Shuiyan kept smiling at Shen Miao. Even if Shen Miao was calm and steady, she was somewhat baffled by Luo Shuiyan's laughter. "Jiao Jiao is really beautiful now," Luo Shuiyan sighed. "I haven't seen you for a year, and you've grown into a young lady. In this Ding capital, one fear that no one is as good-looking as you." Luo Shuiyan's words had always been somewhat domineering. If these words fell into the ears of others, they would probably become a laughing stock. But it was the best for parents to see their daughter, and in addition Luo Shuiyan's temperament was rather violent, but now Shen Miao looked calm and noble. People would always favor things that they did not have. So naturally Luo Shuiyan loved this daughter who was suddenly willing to get close to them like a jewel. Shen Miao smiled slightly. Most likely only her family would be proud of her so-called idiot. "Last night I have discussed with your father." Luo Shuiyan changed the topic. "Previously you said to let your father stay in the Ding capital for half a year more. This idea is not bad. Your father and I are often not in the residence, so we still have to accompany you more. When His Majesty asks about it today, your father will plead with His Majesty." Hearing this, Shen Miao couldn't help but be stunned. She had thought that Shen Xian would eventually listen to her words, but did not expect that it would be this fast. Before she could react, Luo Shuiyan had already hugged her and smiled. "Just nice in this half a year. I can also watch Jiao Jiao grow up." Luo Shuiyan had a fierce reputation in front of her enemies, but in front of Shen Miao, she was very loving. If her former opponents were to see this, one feared that their teeth would fall out from shock. Thanking Mother, Shen Miao snuggled up to Luo Shuiyan and said softly. Chapter 167. Today's last night banquet was not a so-called celebration banquet. It was bound to be extremely dangerous, and when capable people compete, everyone would want to defeat the other party. After laying out the situation and burying the pieces, one would wait for the moment when the other party falls into the trap. Of course, to her, the most important thing was her previous life imprisoned her, buried her children and loved ones, filled with enemies and killings. She finally wanted to return to the 9 palaces. Emperor Wan Hui, the Fu family, and those old friends in the palace. Meeting again, it was unknown who would emerge victorious. Her lips slightly hooked up, and in the depths of her clear eyes, a dark light was like a whirlpool that gradually set off a black storm. The 9 palaces were majestic, glazed tiles, carved vermilion lacquer, golden dragons entrenched, and colorful phoenixes dancing. It was bright and dazzling, but also cold and desolate and miserable. Light was only on the outside, like the fertile soil under the flowers. There were countless bones buried in the depths of the palaces and countless beauties, but at the end, the beautiful bones would wither. The more beautiful the palaces looked, the more dangerous it was. In the garden, a palace maid and a eunuch were watering the flowers. These boring and tedious tasks were done by the new eunuchs and palace maids. Both of them looked to be only 16 or 17 years old and were still very immature. That young palace maid said, "Today there are a lot of people in the front hall. If I did not make a mistake and was demoted, I would be able to go to the front hall to serve those noble people. One must know that every year for the returning banquet, just the rewards can be used for a year." Returning banquet. That young eunuch revealed a yearning expression. Is it very powerful to have so many rewards? Look at you who have no knowledge. The palace maid's lips twitched, really lonely and taciturn. The returning banquet is a banquet that His Majesty specially prepared for the formidable great general. Those who come are all high-ranking officials and womenfolk, so naturally they are generous. If you wait for a few more years and if your luck is good, perhaps you would be able to see it once. At that time you will know that the rewards from those noble people are given in ingots. An ingot of silver? The young eunuch exclaimed and then said enviously, that formidable great general has such a big face that His Majesty specially set up a banquet for him. He must be in the limelight. What's the use of being in the limelight? The palace maid's tone was disdainful. Having such an idiot daughter, it's good that you didn't lose all your face. What limelight is there? Idiot's daughter? The little eunuch asked. The formidable great general's daughter? You probably don't know about this. The palace maid said mysteriously that General Shun is wise and powerful. Shun Foreign is also considered a heroine. Little assistant General Shen is also brave and good at fighting. But the formidable great general's daughter is a complete idiot. Not only did he not know anything about the four arts, but he also liked to wear gold and silver, which was very tacky. Every time General Shun brought her to the returning banquet, she would make a fool of herself. Last year at the returning banquet, I waited on her. You don't know, but she didn't even know basic etiquette. She even missed her dress and rolled down the stairs. Those young ladies and madams loved to mock her the most. Even with the Shin family's protection, everyone still looks down on Miss Shun. Since it was like this, the little eunuch sighed when he heard it. It was a waste of the Shun family's reputation. Is it not so? The palace maid continued. She could be considered as the Shin family's failure. Unfortunately, her two older cousins are more outstanding than her, causing General Shen's face to be thrown away by her. Moreover, previously this young lady of the Shun family was infatuated with His Highness Prince Ding and caused such an uproar that the entire court knew about it. Really a vulgar female. The little eunuch also revealed a look of disgust. That palace maid stayed in the palace every day and was not like those officials, furins, and young ladies who could leave the palace. Thus what she knew were all things that happened in the palace. Thus, during the academy examinations, when Shin Miao was able to wash away the reputation of being vulgar, she did not know about it at all. Chapter 168. Just as they were speaking, they saw someone coming from the opposite side. Both of them quickly buried their heads in their work and did not dare to speak. But they heard that person walking in front of them and said with a sharp voice, "Newcomer?" Replying to Gao Gonggong, "It is." Someone answered at the side. The little eunuch boldly looked up and saw three people standing in front of him. One of them was dressed as a chief eunuch, and the other was dressed as a second-rank eunuch. The one called Gao Gonggong was the one dressed as a chief eunuch. Gao Gonggong swept a glance at both of them, and his eyes landed on the little eunuch before asking, "What is your name?" "This servant Xiaolizi." The little eunuch was also quick-witted and quickly replied respectfully, "Then it shall be him." Gao Gonggong said to the person beside him, "There is a lack of a pot-bearer in the front banquet. He looks well-behaved and would most likely be able to please the noble's eyes. Let him take over." Yes, Xiaolizi's heart was also excited. As such, he would be able to follow what the palace maid said just now and obtain a lot of money as a reward. If he was able to catch the eyes of any master, perhaps he would have some good fortune in the future. In the 9-layered imperial palace, everyone was trying their best to climb up. Even the lowliest servant would dream of flying up to the top of the tree in one night. In the front hall, there were already many furins and young ladies who had arrived. Other than those who had some relationship with the concubines in the palace and were invited to the back to talk to the ladyships, most of the womenfolk were still sitting outside chatting. Why is Shun Foreign and General Shun not here yet? A foreign with high cheekbones smiled. Today's main character is them. Is it that they deliberately came late? Shin Foreign wants to hide her daughter from others, so she deliberately hid it. Another round-faced foreign said with a smile, but the tone of her words was full of ridicule. Shin Xian, as the formidable great general with outstanding meritorious services, did not take in concubines and had the ability to be loyal to Luo Shui Yin. Which of the noble Furins present did not have a lot of concubines in their family and had countless messy matters? Naturally, they were full of jealousy towards Luo Shuiyan's good life. Her husband doted on her, and her son was outstanding. What females loved to compare the most was that Luo Shuiyan was more blessed, and the other Furins were more jealous and wished that Luo Shuiyan would also be bad. Thus Xinmiao's appearance became the only thing that could strike Luo Shuiyan. Xinmiao was stupid and had no talent. Her appearance was not good, and she could still make a fool of herself in the palace. Every year at this time, it was the happiest time for these Furins. To be able to see Shen Xian and his wife being humiliated because of this daughter, it was as if they could gain some benefits. Don't know what kind of clothes fifth Shen young lady will wear this year. A mocking smile floated on Yi Pei Lan's face. Last year her clothes with gold leaves pasted on it was very beautiful and matched with her gold jewelry. It was considered very noble. Could it be silver leaf this year? These words immediately caused the surrounding young ladies to echo in agreement, and their sarcastic remarks rang out incessantly. Just at this moment, a crisp female voice appeared out of thin air. Everyone must not say that. Now fifth Shen young lady can be considered to have received the teachings of General Shen. One must know that even the young master of the Kai family could not do anything to the archery in the academy examinations. What if he is unhappy and wants to exchange pointers with you on another day? As soon as these words came out, the crowd immediately quietened down. Many of the Furins and young ladies here were present at the academy examinations and personally witnessed Shan Miao's fierceness. These words made their hearts involuntarily shiver. That Kai Lin did not even put Shen Miao in his eyes. What if she was angered and an arrow was shot over? The one who said these words was Feng and Ning, and when she said it, she received a disapproving stare from Feng Foreign. It would not be fun to offend so many Furins. Feng and Ning wrinkled her nose unhappily. She could not bear to see these people speaking ill of others behind their backs. In front of Shan Xian, one feared that they would not even dare to let out a fart and still rush to fawn on him and speak ill of others' daughter behind his back. Before the awkward atmosphere dissipated, one could hear a eunuch shouting from outside, "The formidable great general has arrived." Everyone's eyes looked towards the door. The one walking at the front was Shen Xian and Shen Xiu. Shen Xian walked like a dragon and tiger and did not show anger. There was an iron-blooded aura of a soldier that made the Furins in the hall feel terrified. Shen Xiu's posture was tall and his smile was warm. His two shallow dimples made him look very amiable, and all the young females could not help but blush. The two of them did not linger in the front hall. They turned sideways and walked towards the main hall, where the men were. Everyone's eyes naturally fell behind them. Luo Shuiyan was wearing a sky-green soft armor with a waist, and her hair was combed into a neat bun. She was different from those Furins who had heavy makeup. Her outfit was extremely refreshing and simple, but because of the high quality of the fabric, it did not look rough. Her beautiful eyes were moving, and there was a bold and heroic spirit, which was a kind of beauty that was different from ordinary Furins. Following closely behind was a slender purple figure that leisurely walked over. Chapter 169. The originally noisy front hall quietened down in a moment, and everyone's eyes landed on the purple figure behind Luo Shuiyan. The young female's cloak had already been taken off, and she was wearing a purple silk dress with complex patterns that outlined her slim figure. She slightly raised her chin and looked straight ahead, as if the many noble Furins here were not even able to enter her eyes. Her skin was so fair that it was somewhat translucent, but it made her look more delicate and pretty. However, that pair of bright black eyes was the most attractive part. Her eyes were round and her gaze was clear. At first glance, it was as pure as a newborn little beast, but it was so calm that it seemed to have seen through decades of time. This kind of vicissitudes and immaturity intertwined together made her have a kind of contradictory beauty. She followed Luo Shuiyan's footsteps and walked step by step into the hall. Different from Luo Shuiyan's nimble movements, that young female's hands were crossed in front of her chest, but it did not make one feel stiff. It was as if that action had been done thousands of times, and one was familiar with it. Even if it was done casually, it was accurate to the slightest. Her long dress fluttered along with her footsteps like a blooming flower, but that flower was in full bloom and was not ostentatious, just like her entire person. Her movements were very natural, and every step she took was very beautiful. It was pleasing to the eye, and at the same time there was a faint majesty. The women present were all from noble families and naturally had experienced the strict teachings of etiquette instructors on the etiquette of the palace. They thought that they had done a good job here and could not help but be surprised when they saw this young female. This was because if it was them, they would not be able to walk such beautiful steps. Sometimes the shape could be imitated, but the expression could not be imitated. The purple-clad young female's expression did not change, and her posture was calm as if this road was her own backyard. There was no panic, caution, impulsiveness, or timidity as she walked lightly. There was actually a feeling of looking down on all living beings. It was as if she was the owner of this palace. When this thought flashed in their minds, those women could not help but turn pale with fright. It was because if this young female was someone else, it was that idiot Shen Miao. Previously at the academy examinations, Shen Miao's change was obvious to everyone, but since then, Shen Miao and Shen Qing claimed to be sick and stayed in the residence, not even going to Guangwentang. Even though she had defeated Kai Lin in the academy examinations, what she displayed was only viciousness and boldness, but etiquette and bearing was not something that could be achieved overnight. Shen Miao had suffered so many losses in the returning banquet, and it was not an easy matter to reverse it. Who knew that upon seeing Shen Miao today, one would feel that Shen Miao was a completely different person from the past. Not only was there no mistakes in her attire and actions, everyone had a faint feeling that Shen Miao had surpassed all the other officials' daughters in the hall. Shen Miao followed behind Luo Shuiyan and faced everyone's various gazes. No one could see the stiffness on her lips. After more than 10 years, she had finally returned to this place. In her previous life, she had fought and fought in this cage against fate. She wanted to see if this place could still trap her in this lifetime. Every brick and every tile here was deeply engraved in her heart. Even if she closed her eyes, she could still find the way. As for those cumbersome palace etiquette, it was done day after day, and it was almost engraved into her bones. In this hall, when one closed one's eyes, it was as if one could see the scene of Wan Yu smiling and begging her for pastries to eat, and Fu Ming shaking his head and reciting the country's policies. Love and hate were equal, bitterness and sweetness were mixed together. Once again stepping into this place, all sorts of feelings welled up, and what was burning in her heart was the flame of revenge. Xiao Lizi stared blankly at the purple-clad young female, walking behind the valiant-looking woman, and his heart was endlessly shocked. Just now he heard from the palace maids in the garden that Shun Xian's daughter was a coarse idiot, but who knew that when he saw her now, it was not the case at all. There was a kind of noble air lingering around this young female's body, as if one would not be able to withstand that prestige if one looked at her more. How could she be an idiot? Chapter 170. Just as he was thinking, he saw the girl's gaze sweep over him, and she slightly froze. Xiao Lizi suddenly became nervous. He only knew that he had never seen the young lady of the Shin family before. Could it be that this was what the old people in the palace referred to as fate at first sight? Then wouldn't the young miss of the Shin family value him? Just as he was feeling terrified and excited in his heart, he saw that Shan Miao's gaze had instantly turned away, as if it was just an accident. Xiao Lizi's heart was somewhat disappointed in a split second. He did not know why, but he felt that after climbing up this Shan family's young lady, there would be a big fortune waiting for him. But now, he seemed to have missed that great opportunity. Before waiting for Xiao Lizi to figure out where this inexplicable idea came from, a tall foreign sitting at the front of the hall had already smiled and said, "Shen foreign, you really made people wait for a long time." Luo Shuiyan furrowed her brows slightly, and then a bright smile blossomed on her face. There were some delays on the road. Fifth young lady is really getting prettier by the day. That tall foreign's eyes landed on Shen Miao again and said with half-truth and half-falsehood, "Indeed a person who is going to be engaged." Thinking back to the beginning, she was still a little girl. Hearing this, Luo Shuiyan's smile immediately sank. The matter of Shun Miao's engagement was simply inexplicable to Luo Shuiyin. It was the Shun residence's people who did it behind her and Shin Xian's back, but she did not admit it at all and was not afraid of offending the Wei family. In terms of family background, the Wei family was not bad, but it could not be compared to Shin Xian. At most, she would offend the Wei family, and what was more important than Shin Miao's happiness? Moreover, at this moment, Wei Foreign was not present. Wanting to clarify these matters for Shin Miao, Luo Shuiyin opened her mouth. What are you saying? Our Jiao Jiao has just reached a marriageable age, and there is no need to marry so early. I want to keep Jiao Jiao by my side for a few more days. When these words came out, all the Furins and young ladies were stunned. After all, the news of Shun Miao's engagement had spread like wildfire a few days ago. Afterwards, at old Shun Foreign's birthday banquet, the rest of the Shin family almost tacitly agreed, but now when it came to Luo Shuiyin, it seemed that the marriage was going to be empty. The tall lady squinted her eyes as if she sensed that something was amiss. Her smile became more and more meaningful as she said, "Oh, so Shin Foreign still wanted to keep 5th Shin Young Miss for a few more days? But a few days ago, wasn't it said that 5th Shun Young Lady was going to be engaged?" Foreign really knows how to joke. Luo Shuiyin was not afraid of any face, and was even more not afraid that the internal conflicts of the Shin family would be exposed in front of everyone. With relatives like the rest of the Shin family, what was the point of protecting their face? She raised her eyebrows and said loudly, "How can there be a daughter's engagement without her parents knowing anything? Master, and I don't know what Madam is talking about. So where did the engagement come from?" As soon as Luo Shuiyin finished speaking, whispers sounded in the surroundings. The tall lady didn't expect Luo Shuiyin to say that, so she was stunned for a moment. Correct, there was nothing in this world that the parents of a daughter did not know about. For Luo Shuiyin and Shin Xian to not know about Shin Miao's engagement, there was only one reason: the Shin family hid it from them. As for why the Shin family wanted to do this, there were a lot of reasons. Just as everyone was pondering, Ren Wanyun, Chen Rochio, and the rest also arrived. Shin Gui and Shan Wan naturally went to the men's main hall first. Ren Wanyun brought Shen Qing, Chen Rochio, and Shen Yu over slowly. This was the first time Shen Qing went out after she was bedridden, and these days she had lost a lot of weight. She was originally at the best age of a young female, but now there was a faint old fatigue. In order to cover up her haggardness, she put on a thick layer of rouge and powder and wore a red dress. Shen Qing was not suitable for such gorgeous colors, and with one look, it was very unsuitable and somewhat incongruous. In addition, there was a child in her abdomen, so even though she tried her best to cover it up, her steps looked somewhat unsteady. Chapter 171. As for Shunyu, she was as usual wearing a pink long embroidered dress with a light twist and a thin layer of makeup. She looked like a weak and scholarly little beauty. If it was in the past, she would be able to attract everyone's attention, but today it was not the case. With Shen Miao's example, Shen Yu's steps seemed to be a little jerky, her movements were a little stiff, and her expression was a little nervous. Even her hands were clasped together with too much strength. In short, she could not be compared to Shen Miao at all. Thinking about this, everyone's expression became somewhat strange. When did Shen Yu, who was in the limelight in the Shen family, was actually left far behind by Shen Miao? Shen Yu was young and did not know, but Chen Rochio was sensitive enough to detect the difference in those Furin's eyes. If it was in the past, the gaze that landed on her mother and daughter would be filled with jealousy and admiration, but today it seemed to be more picky. Chen Rochio's brows jumped. This etiquette and figure had always been the part that she was most proud of, and she was also very strict with Shen Yu. She was confident that no noble female in the Ding capital could do better than her daughter, but looking at these people's expressions, who else could do better? Naturally, she did not know that the person who did better than Shen Yu was right in front of her. Shen Miao sat beside Luo Shuiyin. Even though Luo Shuiyin was considered as the main character of this returning banquet, it seemed that she was isolated. It was indeed so. The noble families in the capital had always had their own circle. It was still all right for the males as they spoke with their scholarly titles and intertwined in their careers. Even if one did not like it in their heart, they would still have to go over it on the surface. Females were different. Most of the noble females in the capital were proud and arrogant. For example, The D daughters were not willing to play with the Shu daughters, and the people who were born and raised in the Ding capital looked down on outsiders. Luo Shuiyin was that outsider. It was all right if she came from a rich and fertile land in Jiangnan, but unfortunately Luo Shuiyin came from the bitter cold northwest region, and when she just married to the Ding capital, Luo Shuiyin did not even know how to speak, and that accent was secretly ridiculed by these Furins for a long time. They ridiculed that the northwest desert was extremely windy and sandy, and the female's skin was extremely delicate. There were bandits everywhere, and one feared that one would be robbed on the road. As for resources, it was even more scarce, and it was hard to see good silk and satin throughout the year. Of course, there were elements of exaggeration in this, but the targeting of Luo Shuiyin was real. Moreover, Luo Shuiyin was the first one in the Ding capital to go to the battlefield by herself. When faced with something that they could not do, if it was rare, people would often reject it. This was not only the case for women, but also for men. Thus Luo Shuiyin was ostracized by the circle of noble females in the Ding capital. In addition, Shun Miao was previously an out-and-out idiot, so this mother and daughter pair were the targets of these Furins' secret ridicule. Bai Wei's mother, Madame Bai, asked Chen Ruoqiu to sit next to her. She and Chen Ruoqiu were close friends, so naturally, she had to sit with Chen Ruoqiu. Bai Wei pulled Shunyu to her side. Ren Wanyuan walked over to Yi Foreign and sat down. Yi Pei Lan looked at Xin Qing and complained, "You have not appeared for a long time. I heard that you were ill." You look thinner. But why is your face a little swollen?" Xin Qing lowered her head in panic and said vaguely, "Perhaps I've been lying in bed for too long." Ren Wanyuan had decocted a lot of medicine for her to soothe the miscarriage. Even though Xin Qing hated the child in her tummy, she was even more afraid that she would not be able to be a mother after the miscarriage. Thus, she could only clench her teeth and drink it. Since it was to nourish the fetus, one could not do without all kinds of supplements, so naturally one would be fatter. Even though the figure was not visible, it was already somewhat swollen. Yi Pei Lan did not suspect anything and only patted Xin Qing's hands. "You must take care of your body. You are already one who is going to be engaged. One must not spoil your body." Chapter 172. Xin Qing's body trembled, and she lowered her head and did not speak. She knew that Ren Wanyuan had told her about the Huang family's marriage, and that Huang Dexing was considered a young talent, but she did not know why her heart was very resistant to this marriage. It was as if her intuition told her that under this bright and beautiful marriage, there was an unknown danger. Yi Pei Lan's voice was not soft, and was heard by Huang Foreign, who was sitting at the side. When Huang Foreign heard it, she looked at Shan Qing critically. Regarding this marriage, she merely wanted to find a nominal wife for her son. Shan Qing could be considered as a good match for her son, but looking at her sickly appearance today, it would be better if she wasn't a sickly invalid. After all, she still had to carry on the Huang family's ancestral line and give birth to a son. As for the rest, she could do whatever she wanted. At the other end, Bai Foreign was quietly whispering to Chen Ruoqiu, "Ruoqiu, I see that the fifth young lady in your residence is not simple." "Oh?" Chen Ruoqiu asked curiously, "Why do you say so?" "One fear that there is someone guiding fifth Shin young lady from behind." Just now when she came in, all the Furins had seen it. That posture and etiquette was even more proper than in the palace. If I say something that one does not like to hear, one fear that your error is much inferior. Chen Ruoqiu was startled. "What are you saying? Who does not know that fifth lady does not understand etiquette?" Bai Wei was Chen Ruoqiu's best friend and also came from a scholarly family. Thus, naturally, the requirements for etiquette were very high. Today, she looked up to Shen Miao so highly, which made Chen Ruoqiu feel that it was inconceivable. At the same time that she felt that it was ridiculous, she could not help but look towards the place where Luo Shuiyin was sitting. Luo Shuiyin was isolated as she sat at one side, and Shen Miao was next to her. Luo Shuiyin was after all old and had a lot of experience, so even if no one paid attention to her, she would not have the slightest change in expression. She only needed to bring out the same imposing manner that she had on the battlefield that would not change color even if empty Tai collapsed in front of her. But Xin Miao, a young female, also sat upright. If others did not speak to her, it did not look like they were deliberately ignoring her, but more like they did not dare to speak to her. Chun Rochio's fingertips were somewhat trembling. The womenfolk all had their own thoughts, and in the main hall, Shinexion's words had also set off a huge wave in the hall. Official Shun's words are true? Emperor Wenhui asked. Emperor Wenhui was close to 60 years of age, but did not look old at all. There was a smile on his face, and his pair of eyes were astute and sharp, and one could faintly see the sharpness of his youth. At this moment, he looked down at Shinexion and asked in a low voice. Just now in front of all the officials, Emperor Wenhui rewarded Shinexion, but Shinexion requested for Emperor Wenhui to bestow a grace to allow him to stay in the Ding capital for half a year, as he wanted to accompany his wife and daughter in the residence. For so many years, the formidable great general Shinexion had fought on the battlefield and was brave and invincible, but he had never made such a request. For a moment, it made people think deeply, and the expressions of the officials changed. At this critical moment, Shinexion wanted to stay in the capital for half a year. Was it really just to accompany his loved ones? Emperor Wenhui sized up Shinexion. He had not died yet, but the fight for the throne between the princes was already like a storm. Now the situation was ever-changing, and any party's intervention would cause the entire situation to change. A few days ago, the matter of Shinexion's daughter, Shun Miao, being infatuated with Prince Ding had spread like wildfire. Emperor Wenhui even thought about what would happen if this fat piece of meat of the Shin family landed in Fu Xiuyi's hands. But who knew that there was suddenly no news of it? Now that Shinexion suddenly made such a request, could it be that there was another plan? He carefully sized up the man below. Shinexion's skin was dark and his eyes were firm. His figure was as straight as a hill, and when he looked at Emperor Wenhui, his actions were also respectful. He was a loyal and brave Iron Man. But when an emperor controls his subjects, it was never based on the surface but the value. To Emperor Wenhui, if there was a threat to the country, even if it was a huge merit, it must be removed cleanly. Chapter 173. After a moment, Emperor Wenhui laughed out loud. For so many years, official Shun has been guarding the northwestern region, and now that the enemy has been defeated, Zhan is deeply gratified. It is Ming Qi's blessing to have such a general. Official Shun's request, Zhan will approve. Shinexion immediately thanked. Thanking your majesty. This action made the other people in the hall to look at him. After Emperor Wenhui approved, he walked out of the main hall, leaving a group of people behind. Shinexion's action just now was unexpected, and the first to speak was actually the Marquis of Lineage, Xieding. This person who had been dealing with the Shin family for a lifetime obviously did not understand Shinexion's actions and ridiculed. Could it be that General Shun is afraid of the war and stay in the Ding capital for half a year to enjoy? When Shinexion heard it, he was not angry and even smiled, revealing his white teeth. Is Marquis Xie envious of this general? Ai, it is no wonder. After all, Marquis Xie does not have a wife and daughter. You. Xieding's face was livid. Shinexion, this fellow looked like a big and rough person without any schemes, but in fact his mouth was the most poisonous. Princess Yuqing's death and Xie Jingxing treating him like a stranger was Xieding's Achilles heel, and Shinexion mercilessly stabbed him with a knife. Xieding really wished that he could use a spear to stab Shinexion to death. Fu Xiuyi looked at Shinexion, and his expression was rather interesting. The Shin family had exceeded his expectations time and time again. In the past, Shan Miao admired him, and even though he was annoyed, he thought that he could make use of the Shin family. Afterwards, Shin Miao actually clarified that she had no such intentions towards him and caused Fu Xiuyi to be ridiculed by Prince Zhou and Prince Jing. Now that Shinexion proposed to stay in the capital for half a year, it made people even more puzzled. Fu Xiuyi had an inexplicable feeling that the Shun family that seemed to be the easiest to grasp suddenly became an unstable rock. It seemed that in the future, there would be numerous variables that would affect the overall situation. Shinexion's unconventional moves made the officials somewhat inexplicable, but the rewards that he obtained today made everyone jealous. The rest of the people went up one after another and sincerely or falsely congratulated him. Shinexion talked to them about the interesting matters in the northwest region, but did not notice that there was a gloomy gaze behind him. That gaze stared fixedly at Shinexion, as if it was a man-eating poisonous snake entrenched in the grass, waiting for the opportunity to rush up and bite him to death. And that person who was looking at Shun Xian, the corner of his robe was empty and was playing with the thumb ring in his hand. It was not someone else but Prince Yu. The atmosphere here was rather lively, and Shen Xiu had also blocked Wei Qian in the corridor outside. Wei Qian was also considered talented and humble, but compared to the healthy and energetic Shen Xiu, he seemed too weak and frail. He looked at Shen Xiu and asked with a frown, "Little Deputy General Shun, why are you stopping me?" Shen Xiu sized up Wei Qian from head to toe. He himself had a cheerful and friendly temperament, and if he met Wei Qian in the past, perhaps he would make friends, but after hearing Shen Miao say that Wei Qian already had a sweetheart in his heart, looking at this person again made him angry. From Shen Xiu's point of view, his younger sister was very good, but she did not like others. How could she tolerate being despised? "You are Wei Qian?" Thinking of this, Shen Xiu's tone was not very happy. Wei Qian was startled for a moment and sensed that the person who came was not kind. "Exactly. I am here for nothing." Shen Xiu patted Wei Qian's shoulder and said, "Just to inform you that previously there was a rumor that my younger sister was engaged to your Wei family. Since it is a rumor, my Shen family did not take it to heart, so your Wei family need not take it to heart." Shen Xiu took a step back and acted as if nothing had happened but said in an eerie tone, "My younger sister is picking a husband so naturally she must first ask my eyes." Finishing, he did not even look at Wei Qian's face as he turned and strode away. Wei Qian was stunned at the same spot. Shen Xiu's words clearly wanted to draw a line with his Wei family, but it was true that he had a sweetheart. Even if Shen Xiu felt injustice for his younger sister, there was no need to say that he was a good-for-nothing fool. The Shen family's protection was too fierce. Moreover, there was no chance for him to intervene in this marriage. Outside the corridor, Gao Yang was overjoyed as he looked at Wei Qian, who was standing there in a daze. He shook his head and said, "This Shen family is just too overbearing. To be so arrogant and not even put the Wei family in their eyes. Have seen enough?" The purple-clad youth beside him had a hint of impatience in his eyes, and his tone was not pleasant. "Is there an end to it? Wei Qian is your person," Gao Yang said. "He is being bullied like this, and you are not going to stand up for him? If you like, you go." Xie Jingxing glanced at him. "I do not dare." Gao Yang said as if he was watching a good show. "That Shen family girl has so many people protecting her. If one is not careful, trouble will come knocking." But his smile was gentle, but his tone was somewhat gloating. "Today Prince Yu is present, so one fear that the matter would not be good. I heard that Prince Yu plans to marry a Wang Fei. Guess which Shun family's young lady he wants to marry? I guess that he cannot marry." Xie Jingxing raised his eyebrows, and his eyes fell to the front. In the garden, a familiar figure trotted forward and said something to the little eunuch at the other side before stuffing a sachet into the little eunuch's hands. That figure was Shen Miao's personal maid, Jingji. Chapter 174. He is unable to marry. Gao Yang followed Xie Jingxing's gaze and saw that in the flowering shrubs, Shen Miao's personal maid was instructing the little eunuch something, and the little eunuch complied. Most likely it was his first time receiving so much money, as he was overjoyed and respectfully said something to the maid before leaving. After the little eunuch left, Jingzhe stood at the same spot, and there was a trace of suspicion on her face. Shen Miao specifically instructed her to hand the things over to this little eunuch, but this little eunuch was obviously a newcomer to the palace and did not have any interaction with Shen Miao, so why was there a special instruction? Unable to think of the reason, Jingzhe shook her head. In any case, the purpose had been achieved, so she turned and left. "This young lady of the Shen family is very courageous," Gao Yang evaluated, "to even dare to play tricks in the palace, and it seems that Shen Xian was not aware of it." Xie Jingxing declined to comment. For a person who dared to burn her own ancestral hall, he never thought that the other party would be timid. As for what to do at what place, most likely in Shen Miao's eyes, there was no difference. "Let's go." A strange smile floated on his lips. "We should also go and watch the show." "I will not go." Gao Yang blinked his eyes. Now it is better to be careful when doing things. Moreover, there is a change in the plan, so one must be more cautious. "Up to you." Xie Jingxing said lazily and suddenly thought of something and casually said, "If there is time, go to those old fellows at the Imperial Medical Institution to inquire if there is anything." "Yes, sir." Gao Yang cupped his hands in obeisance, then walked toward the other side at a steady pace. Time passed by unhurriedly, and it was almost time for the returning banquet to begin. The females sat at the bottom of the Great Hall, while the males sat at the top of the Great Hall. The one on the leftmost side, near the center, was the prince. Prince Zhou, Prince Jing, and Prince Ding had already arrived. Following behind were Prince Li, Prince Xiang, and Prince Cheng. Prince Zhou and Prince Jing were brothers, so naturally they were in the same group. Prince Xiang and Prince Cheng were led by Prince Li and formed their own faction. As for His Highness the Crown Prince, who had yet to arrive, he had the support of Prince Xian and Prince Chu. As for the ninth prince, His Highness Prince Ding, Fu Xiuyi, he did not belong to any faction and looked to be the weakest and most neutral faction. With the appearance of the three kings, the clamor in the hall gradually quietened down. Emperor Wenhui was also strange. He had 9 sons, and each of them were extremely outstanding. If it was an ordinary family, they would have been overjoyed to have so many outstanding sons. But in a noble family, the more outstanding sons there were, the more intense the competition would be. What was even more unfortunate was that these 9 outstanding sons were born into the most ruthless imperial family in the world. This also meant that their excellence would become a nail in each other's eyes, and both of them wanted to get rid of it. Now that the 9 sons had grown up, even though the crown prince had been crowned, the various factions had yet to restrain themselves. When Emperor Wenhui was still around, he was still able to maintain the balance, but there would be a day when this entrenched dragon would grow old, and at that time, the imperial family of Ming-Chi that was already ready to move would be another reign of terror. And in Prince Zhou's faction, Prince Li's faction, and the Crown Prince's faction, the Crown Prince looked to have the highest strength on the surface, but the Crown Prince's body was weak, and Emperor Wenhui would not allow a weak son to sit on the dragon throne. So the Crown Prince's power was not so much that it was a follower of the orthodox lineage, but rather it was fake. If one's body was slightly unwell, it would only benefit Prince Xian and Prince Chu. In Prince Li's faction, because of the large number of people, there were many officials who secretly pledged their allegiance to him. Even though Prince Zhou and Prince Jing's legitimacy was not as good as the Crown Prince's and their power was not as good as Prince Li's, but they had the Emperor's doted mother, consort Su Xian, and the Su family had a strong support. Chapter 175. The remaining Prince Ding was not placed in anyone's eyes. In terms of power, it was a joke to fight alone. In terms of background, his birth mother consort Dong Shu was extremely low-key, and if she did not give birth to Fu Xiuyi, she would not be able to sit in the position of the 4 consorts. Even though Fu Xiuyi was outstanding and humble, there was a limit to one's strength, thus everyone was not optimistic about him. Even though Fu Xiuyi was neutral and was not interested in the fight for the throne, but in this deep palace, one must be wary of others. His few brothers were still eyeing him covetously. However, the female guests did not look at people as deeply as the males, but the young females present were secretly sizing up Fu Xiuyi's handsome appearance and whispered with slightly red faces. In all fairness, the Fu family all had good looks, and Fu Xiuyi was the most outstanding among the 9 princes. The imperial family bestowed him with an extraordinary bearing, and he always had an indifferent attitude, not putting on a high and mighty attitude, nor raising his chin up to the sky. To the young females, this kind of amiable and out-of-this-world male was really full of elegance. His Highness Prince Ding is indeed too handsome. A young female's whisper sounded beside her ears. Xin Miao turned her head and did not know when Feng and Ning was already by her side. She smiled at her and then said with a straight face, "Since you have arrived, why did you not come and look for me, and even put on the airs of an eldest young lady to make me look for you?" Xin Miao was somewhat inexplicable by her words. Towards Feng and Ning, this eldest young lady, sticking to her like a piece of sticky candy, Xin Miao was also somewhat helpless. She did not know when did Feng and Ning changed her attitude towards her. Xin Miao was after all not a real budding young female, and was unable to be as intimate as peers with Feng and Ning. Moreover, now she was unable to accept the goodwill of others without any precaution, so she did not know how to treat Feng and Ning. Finally, she could only shake her head and find an excuse. I did not see you. Shen Miao naturally did not know that if it was the previous her, Feng and Ning would not even take a glance at her. But the current Shen Miao was the Empress who had been bathed in a storm of blood in the inner palace of Ming Qi. One would have a feeling of worship towards those who were stronger than themselves. Feng and Ning could faintly feel the strength in Shen Miao's heart and naturally would unconsciously follow. Uft! Feng and Ning's lips twitched and suddenly whispered teasingly, "But His Highness Prince Ding is also here. In any case, he is also your favorite person. Why did you not take a look?" As if to prove her words, when Feng and Ning's voice landed, Jiang Shaoxian laughed loudly. "Fifth Shen young lady, His Highness Prince Ding has arrived." She wanted to embarrass Shen Miao and knew that under the watchful eyes of the public, in front of the imperial family, Shen Miao would not dare to get angry, and even Luo Shuiyan would have to endure it. Feng of Shen of Shen of Shen. Shi Shen Shen, she of words, of Shen of the Shen. Shen 2, Ding Shen Shen Shen, Shen Ding Shen Shen. Shi Ding Shen of King of Shen. Luo Shuiyan gritted her teeth. She knew that this person was deliberately provoking Shen Miao. Even though Shen Miao said that she was no longer in love with Prince Ding, but Luo Shuiyan knew that liking a person was not something that one could easily give up. Shen Miao looked as if nothing had happened on the surface, but one's heart was in extreme pain. Luo Shuiyan was annoyed that Shen Xian was not present at this time. She turned her head to look at Shen Miao, fearing that Shen Miao would be sad, and said softly, "Jiao Jiao." At the male side of the banquet, everyone's eyes were also very interesting. Kai Lin's lips twitched, as if he was rejoicing in others' misfortune. In the academy examinations, Shen Miao caused him to lose face, and now Shen Miao herself was going to repeat his mistakes. Su Mingfeng and Su Ming Lang were sitting side by side. Su Ming Lang pulled Su Ming Feng's sleeves and said in surprise, "Eldest brother, has older sister Shen also arrived?" Chapter 176. His head was too small, and the table blocked his line of sight, making it even more impossible for him to see Shen Miao clearly. Su Mingfeng shook his head. He did not know why this younger brother of his had a good impression of the fifth young lady of the Shen family. If it was not because Su Ming Lang was too young, Su Mingfeng would have thought that this younger brother of his had other thoughts about Shen Miao. But he also turned his head to look at Shen Miao. With such a close distance encounter, how would Shen Miao face Prince Ding? At the corner of the male side of the banquet, there was a green-clad male. Compared to the other noble people who were dressed in brocade clothes, his dressing was extremely simple, but this did not make him cut a sorry figure. On the contrary, because of his simple dressing, there was a kind of romantic and unrestrained attitude of an ancient scholar. At this moment, he was quietly looking at the purple-clad young female, who kept her head down, and there was a faint fluctuation in his eyes. This person was Pei Lang. Pei Lang was not qualified to participate in such an occasion, but today there was a death in the family of the supervisor of Guangwen Tang. Thus the supervisor let Pei Lang represent Guangwen Tang to participate. Even though Pei Lang was a teacher in Guangwen Tang, he was considered as half a supervisor, thus he did not decline. Who knew that when he arrived, he would see such a scene? Prince Zhou and Prince Jing stood beside Fu Xiuyi and heard Jiang Shaoxian's deliberately provocative words. Prince Zhou laughed and patted Fu Xiuyi's shoulder before saying meaningfully, "Our ninth younger brother is really amazing." Fu Xiuyi's brows slightly wrinkled, but there was a faint smile on his face. Fourth older brother must be joking. Even though he said so, his eyes unconsciously drifted towards the young female in the seat. A light laugh escaped from the young female's lips, and the surroundings suddenly quietened down. This laugh did not have any emotions. To say that it was ridiculing, it was too gentle. To say that it was cheerful, it was very calm. It was like a cup of strong wine that had been settled for a long time. 5 flavors were mixed together, and 1,000 complex flavors were in one's heart before it finally turned into a light laughter. The males were still all right, but the females were surprised. They had been immersed in the inner courtyard for so many years, but they could not hear the meaning in Shen Miao's laughter. How old was she? Shen Miao raised her head, and her eyes did not stop. It was like the arrow that was shot at Kailin at the academy examinations as it shot towards the figure who was standing with his hands behind his back, Fu Xiaoyi. Fu Xiaoyi was slightly startled. There was no infatuation, love, worship, or surprise in the girl's eyes. There was only a bottomless calm. He was like an old man who had reincarnated for 100 years, looking at him through the vicissitudes of time. There was no sorrow or joy in his eyes, but it made one feel uneasy. That pair of clear eyes had an extremely beautiful shape. If they were curved, it would be so sweet that it would remind people of the taste of honey. But she only watched quietly. In Fu Xiaoyi's heart, there was a sudden surge of uneasiness. It was as if he was walking alone in the jungle, but in the depths of the grass, there was a huge beast that was staring at him. That feeling of uneasiness was getting stronger and stronger, and one did not know when the faint smile on his face had disappeared as he stared fixedly at Shen Miao. Heh. Shen Miao chuckled again, and this time, everyone could see it clearly. Her rosy lips slightly curved, but the corners of her eyes did not move. It was clearly a sneer. It was probably a cold sneer formed from a faint resentment towards the person he loved but couldn't get because his love had turned into hatred. Everyone thought like this, but were surprised that Shen Miao dared to express her dissatisfaction so straightforwardly. Who would have the guts to sneer at a prince in the palace? Fu Xiaoyi did not move. In that sneer, he could clearly see a layer of faint murderous intention. Even though it was deliberately concealed, it was as if it could not be concealed at all. That kind of coldness that was determined to win actually caused his heart to shrink. Chapter 177. Just because he did not accept the other's intention, she had the intention to kill him? Fu Xiaoyi was somewhat stunned. What made him even more surprised was that he actually felt that the intention to kill was full of threat. Could this be his illusion? When he looked at Shen Miao again, the latter had already turned her head and said something to Feng Aning. There was a flash of killing intent in Shen Miao's eyes. After such a long time, even in the academy examinations, she only saw Fu Xiaoyi from afar and did not want to meet Fu Xiaoyi at such a close distance. It was because she was afraid that once she got close to Fu Xiaoyi, she would not be able to hide her monstrous hatred. Jiang Shaoxian's provocative words were passed by Shen Miao's two inexplicable chuckles. Her first chuckle was complicated, and the second chuckle was slightly cold, but even a fool could see that there was no trace of affection towards Fu Xiaoyi in it. After two chuckles, she simply spoke directly to the young lady beside her. That contempt and disregard made one unable to tell if it was intentional or unintentional. It was just that the atmosphere was made cold by her. There was a flash of light in Prince Zhou's eyes as he smiled and leaned close to Fu Xiaoyi, ninth younger brother. It seems that you are not that invincible. Fu Xiaoyi smiled bitterly, but his heart gradually paid more attention to Shen Miao. Hey, it seems that the fifth young lady of the Shen family has some spirit, Su Mingfeng said with interest. Now that his serious illness was much better, but he was still unable to work hard, thus his official position was not restored. Older Shen's sister is originally very good. Su Ming Lang rolled his eyes at him. Pei Lang, who was seated, lowered his head to take a sip of tea, but his eyes flashed with deep thoughts. Just as there was some silence, one heard a hearty laughter. Ha ha. Everyone, one has arrived late. That small mountain-like figure was not Shen Xian. The one following closely behind Shen Xian was Shen Xiu. Seeing that the important person had arrived, all the bureaucrats greeted him. Shen Xian greeted Prince Zhou and the rest before taking their seats. He and Shen Xiu also missed the good show just now, else even if Shen Xian did not take action, Shen Xiu did not care if he would have tender and protective feelings for the fair sex and would definitely make Jiang Shaoxian unable to bear the consequences. After Shen Xian, the princely trio and the crown prince trio also arrived. The crown prince's body was weak, but the crown princess was born with a dignified air. Shen Miao looked at the crown princess and her eyes were moved. This crown prince consort had the prime minister's family behind her, and it was the crown prince who used the power of the crown prince consort's family to stabilize his position. Afterwards, when the crown prince consort was pregnant, Emperor Wen Hui was afraid that the crown prince's body would be seriously ill and it would benefit the crown prince consort's family to monopolize power. So he used methods to make the crown prince consort miscarry. The crown princess was deeply in love with the crown prince, but she didn't know that her husband could kill his own flesh and blood. She was also afraid that if she told her paternal family, it would bring disaster to her paternal family. In the end, she died of depression. 3 years after the death of the crown prince consort, the residents of the prime minister came to know of the truth and wanted to take revenge for their daughter, but in the end they relied on Fu Xiu. Shun Miao looked at the cup in front of her. The members of the Fu family were all vicious and merciless, and the men of the Fu family were all unfaithful and fickle. She and the crown princess were no different. They were all sacrifices for power, innocent pawns abandoned. Now, she was going to be the chess player. Whoever wanted to play chess had to be prepared to sacrifice themselves. After the crown princess sat down, her friends from before she got married chatted and laughed with her. Over at the male side, Prince Yu also arrived. When Prince Yu arrived, the people at the female side of the banquet were somewhat silent, especially those young females who were so scared that their faces turned pale. In the previous returning banquets, Prince Yu would not participate. For so many years, he did not put the matters of the court in his eyes, and because of this, the suspicious Emperor Wan Hui was exceptionally tolerant to this younger brother. Of course, there was the credit of Prince Yu risking his life to protect him when he was young, but if it was not for Prince Yu being well-behaved for so many years and not interfering in the matters of the court, one feared that no matter how big the life-saving grace was, it would not be able to overcome Emperor Wan Hui's suspicions. After all, Emperor Wan Hui's brothers all died in his hands. Chapter 178. Prince Yu of the first rank, who had never participated in the returning banquet, suddenly appeared, which made the female guests uneasy and the male guests puzzled. But the few princes were smiling in their hearts. The woman who was on good terms with the crown princess said, "I wonder why His Highness the Crown Prince has appeared?" Her words were filled with probing intent. The crown princess naturally knew the reason. She curled the corners of her lips and said with a smile, "Royal uncle has been single for so many years. It is time to find someone to take care of his life." As soon as these words came out, the womenfolk were all bewildered. Could it be that Prince Yu of the first rank wanted to choose a Wangfei? But becoming Prince Yu's consort was not a good thing. At least at this moment, the young ladies could not help but shrink back a little. "May I ask the crown princess?" the foreign asked with a smile. "Which young miss has the good fortune?" But the crown princess was unwilling to say. She only shook her head and said with a smile, "You will know in a while." Because of the crown princess's words, the womenfolk sank into a stalemate. Everyone was slightly afraid. That Yu Wangfei's title was like a talisman that hastened one's death. Sleeping with her would only result in a faster death. How could it be considered as a good thing? Feng and Ning leaned close to Xin Miao and asked, "Make a guess. Who exactly is that Yu Wangfei?" Xin Miao said, "I cannot guess. You are really boring." Feng and Ning curled her lips. On the other side, Shun Qing was tightly grabbing onto the corner of her clothes. The moment she saw Prince Yu, her mind was filled with the myriad of tortures that Prince Yu used on her that night. If it was not for Ren Wanyun who was tightly pinching her, Shun Qing would have screamed out loud. "Do not be afraid of Qing'er." Ren Wanyun moved closer to Xin Qing's ear and spoke to her in a voice that only the two of them could hear. "Today Prince Yu is here to help you tidy up that woman. When she enters Prince Yu residence, naturally there will be means to make her beg for death." At the side, Chen Roqiu looked at Ren Wanyun and Chun Qing's movements and drank a mouthful of tea before smiling gently. After Prince Yu, one thought that other than the Emperor and Empress, everyone had almost arrived, but suddenly there were bursts of exclamations. Feng and Ning was talking to Xin Miao when she heard the commotion and looked up. In the depths of the palace, outside the door of the main hall, a person walked over from afar. He was dressed in a purple gold robe and a pair of green silk boots. His features were bright and unbelievably handsome. His footsteps were neither fast nor slow as he walked over lazily. The Marquis of Lineage, Xieting first cried out in surprise, "Jing Xing." Then he thought of something and frowned as he looked at the figure, unable to speak. Everyone was surprised. What was the background of today's returning banquet? Not only did Prince Yu, who never appeared at palace banquets, appear, Now even the little marquis of the Xie family, Xie Jingxing, also appeared, and the excited and infatuated look of the womenfolk was no less than when Fu Xiaoyi appeared and even steadily pressed down. The youth's posture was ramrod straight. Although his gait looked casual, each step he took had its own imposing aura. He already had an outstanding appearance to begin with, but now, with the contrast of the purple-gold robe, there was a faint feeling that he couldn't be looked at directly. Her face was like snow, her eyes were like lacquer, and her eyebrows were like swords. The corners of her lips were slightly raised, like a red plum blossom that had bloomed amidst the ice and snow. This face that was more delicate than a female's did not have a trace of a female's femininity. Instead, it was like the rising sun in the sky, full of dazzling eyes. When he walked over alone, all the civil and military officials seemed to have become a foil. It was as if the imperial family of Ming Qi and the dazzling golden palace had finally aroused the nobility and arrogance that was engraved in his bones. It was so handsome that it made the heaven and earth lose their colors. And this youth that was like the scorching sun had a dense and sharp gaze. That frivolous smile, if one looked carefully, was full of indifference and cruelty. Chapter 179. When did this little marquis of the Xie family become so outstanding? Feng and Ning muttered. In the past, even though Xie Jingxing was also very handsome and flamboyant, but compared to him today, he was overshadowed. It was as if the past Xie Jingxing had deliberately covered up the brilliance, but the current Xie Jingxing had removed that layer of concealment. The real him, this elegance, compared to Fu Xiaoyi, it was as if he was the person who should stand at the peak of the dynasty overlooking all living beings. When this thought came out, Xinmiao was shocked by herself. She looked up at Xie Jingxing. The purple-clad youth walked to the front of the banquet and faced everyone's surprised gaze. He raised his eyebrows and smiled. Today I am also here to join in the fun. As she spoke, she walked to the banquet and sat down, but it was not beside the Marquis of Lineage, Xie Ding, but beside Su Ming Feng. Su Ming Lang pursed his lips and reluctantly moved a small area. Seeing this, Xie Ding's face darkened. When the surrounding people saw it, even though they were discussing it, they did not obstruct it. Xie Jingxing had always had such a frivolous temperament, and most likely today he did it on a whim. The Xie family has produced an extraordinary person. Luo Shuiyan's expression was solemn. Whether it was a dragon or a worm, she had always been accurate in judging people. This Xie Jingxing's actions had a kind of magnanimity that made people feel a little dangerous for no reason. Those who had been on the battlefield were more sensitive to danger. When Xinqiu saw Xie Jingxing, his eyes lit up and he almost stood up. He then scratched his head and grabbed the teacup in front of the table to cover up and gulped a mouthful of tea. This kind of rude behavior caused the surrounding people to look at him strangely. Xinqiu quickly chuckled. This kid from the Xie clan is not bad. Shun Xian was very satisfied. Towards Xie Jingxing, who was able to cause trouble for his old rival, he was unable to express his appreciation in words. If the other party was not from the Xie family, he might have become sworn brothers with the other party. The princes of the Fu clan all had gloomy looks on their faces. This little marquis of the residence of the Marquis of Lin looked too outstanding. Although he did not enter the imperial court, just based on his unruly temperament, one could already feel that he was not someone who would submit to others. If he couldn't subdue such a person, it was best to kill him as soon as possible. Seeing a marquis's residence that held the commander's seal grow stronger and produce an important figure was not something the imperial family was willing to see. At this moment, the eunuch's drawn-out voice was heard, "His Majesty has arrived. Her Majesty the Empress has arrived." The celestial Empress finally arrived as everyone had been waiting for. Emperor Wenhui seemed to be in a good mood, but the Empress was somewhat fierce. As a female, she was considered beautiful and one could see the charm of her youth, but as she grew older, her cheeks were sunken and she looked somewhat mean. Due to the crown prince's illness, the Empress's methods had always been very harsh. Previously, Shen Miao stood on Fu Xiaoyi's side, and after marrying to Fu Xiaoyi, she was often made difficult by this Empress and suffered countless hardships in the hands of this Empress. It was also this empress who used herself as an example to teach Shen Miao how to survive in the palace. Everything that had happened in the past was just an illusion. She had come for revenge, but her ultimate goal was to completely overthrow the entire royal family. A mayfly trying to shake a tree was like trying to save a cart with a cup of water, just like the distance between her and the empress. But this empress seat was originally hers, and one day, she would sit on that seat again. Shen Miao's eyes drooped down and gently picked up the teacup in front of her to take a sip. Not far from her, Shun Qing also revealed a slight smile, as if to celebrate with her, and at the same time raised the teacup to take a sip. Her smile seemed to be even more carefree. The blackness in Shun Miao's eyes became thicker and her lips curled up. It was different from a sneer, as this smile had curved eyebrows, and the sweet look was extremely moving. Even at the male side of the banquet, those who noticed this side were dazzled by Shan Miao's smile. Pei Lang kept staring at Shen Miao. He did not know why he did it, as if there was something about this young female that attracted him. But a few months ago, Shen Miao was just an idiot in Guangwantang. Pei Lang treated her warmly, but it was only out of etiquette. In his heart, he looked down on her. The emperor and empress sat down and the banquet began. This so-called monarch and officials enjoying together was just for show. The monarch was still the monarch, and the officials were still officials. Everyone were making harmless jokes, as if it was really the Son of Heaven and the common people enjoying together. Su Mingfeng nudged Xie Jingxing. "Why are you here? Come to watch the fun." Xie Jingxing's lips hooked up and the female side of the banquet suddenly drew in a low breath. "So boring. What fun is there to watch?" Su Mingfeng had a headache. Just as he was speaking, he saw Prince Yu opening his mouth, imperial older brother. His voice was not high nor low, but the hall immediately quietened down. It was obvious that everyone was extremely fearful of this fiend. A few days ago, this younger brother had already thought clearly about the matter of the consort selection that was promised to this younger brother. Prince Yu smiled strangely. "Since today is a happy event, why not have a double happiness? This younger brother is fond of Shun family's young lady." He said it very slowly, and the viper-like light in his eyes was entangled, like maggots in a tarsal bone, tightly climbing in front of the purple-clad young female. Chapter 180. This younger brother likes Shun family's young lady. With an uproar, the hall was instantly in an uproar, and all gazes looked towards the 3D young ladies of the Chen clan. Of the 3 young ladies of the Shen family, Shen Qing was already engaged, leaving only Shen Yu and Shen Miao. Shen Yu was gentle and moving, and her talent had spread far and wide. Now that Shen Miao was a slender and elegant young female, her bearing also made others cast sidelong glances at her. The most important thing was that behind Shen Miao was Shen Xian, this great Buddha, and everyone could see clearly that the person that Prince Yu was looking at was Shen Miao. In a moment, everyone's gaze towards Shen Miao was extremely strange. There were those who rejoiced in her misfortune, and there were also those who pitied her. The previous Princess Yu's death was not clear, and everyone knew that there was something fishy about it. Everyone was well aware of what kind of demonic temperament this Prince Yu had. However, such a person was deeply protected by the royal family. On one side was the dignified General Wei Wu, and on the other side was the emperor's brother who had saved his life. How should he choose? When Prince Yu of the first rank finished speaking, Shen Xian's face sunk and the veins on his forehead even popped out. The mighty general's reputation had never been undeserved. For a moment, there was a kind of ferocious hostility that overflowed, causing the expressions of the surrounding people to change. This official was a loyal official, but if he could not even protect his own daughter, even if he had to stake his life and meritorious services, Shen Xian would not fear going against Prince Yu. Shen Xiu also tightened his lips and stared fiercely at Prince Yu, as if as long as Prince Yu said Shen Xian's name, he would rush out and fight to the death with Prince Yu. As for Luo Shuiyan, she was already holding Shan Miao's hand tightly. Her carefree smile had long fallen and was replaced with a deep ruthlessness, as if she was a mother wolf protecting her cub and did not give in to the other's coercion. When the surrounding people saw the Shun family's behavior, they could not help but exclaim in their hearts, Now that Emperor Wen Hui was on the high seat and the Shin family made such a stance, there was a feeling of swords being drawn in the air. Emperor Wen Hui was overly suspicious, and the Shin family had no fear even though they were above the emperor's prestige. Were they not afraid of leaving a knot in Emperor Wen Hui's heart in the future? Prince Ding's eyes also moved slightly, and there was a trace of surprise in his eyes when he looked at Shen Miao. It seems that this fifth Shen young lady is indeed General Shen's treasure. Su Mingfeng whispered to Xie Jingxing. The Shen family can actually do this for her. Going against Prince Yu was equivalent to going against the imperial family. No matter what, the Shen family's actions at this moment had clearly expressed their unyielding attitude. One feared that even if Emperor Wen Hui issued a decree, the Shen family would not easily agree to it. Xie Jingxing smiled lazily and declined to comment. In the corner, Pei Lang tightened his grip on his teacup. What would the girl who shot an arrow at her classmate without blinking during the academy examination do? Emperor Wen Hui's smile was somewhat unfathomable, and the gaze that he looked at the Shen family was somewhat dark. He said, "Which young lady of the Shen family did royal younger brother fancy?" Everyone was waiting for Prince Yu's answer. A carefree smile floated on Shun Qing's face, but before that smile could rise higher, he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his abdomen and could not help but cry out miserably as he clutched his abdomen and fell to the ground. What happened? Qinger. Shun Qing's sudden action made everyone jump in shock. Ren Wanyun immediately hugged her, and Shun Qing's face quickly turned pale. Shin Yu pulled the corner of Qin Rochio's clothes, and the latter's heart jumped. She did not know why, but she looked towards Shen Miao. But one saw the purple-clad young female sitting at the table, and her expression did not waver. When she met Qin Rochio's gaze, she gently smiled and turned to look at Luo Shuiyin before asking worriedly, "What happened to eldest sister? Could it be that she was poisoned?" Chapter 181. Poisoned. When the words were said, the surroundings suddenly became chaotic. Shin Miao did not let it go and continued to look at Luo Shuiyin. Could it be that an assassin sneaked in? This time, not only the female guests, even the male guests, the few princes and emperor Wen Hui's face changed. During the returning banquet, all the civil and military officials were present, and if an assassin sneaked in, the imperial family would be in danger. Immediately the guards outside all rushed in and their hands were on the swords at their waists, as they watched the surrounding movements like a tiger watching its prey. One was the possibility of an assassin sneaking in, and the other was Shen Qing, who was lying on the ground moaning in pain. As such, no one cared about Prince Yu's words about marrying a young lady from the Shen family. After all, compared to these rumors, one's life was more important. Su Mingfeng opened his mouth, and after a long while he whispered in admiration, "Good means." With just one sentence from Shen Miao, the focus of everyone's attention was shifted. The current chaos and tension made Prince Yu look like a fool. Xie Jingxing swept a glance at the young female who had a worried face and lightly snorted. Shen Miao's eyes slightly moved. After being with the Fu family for so many years, no one understood the Fu family's suspicions better than her. Shen Qing's appearance, with a slight mention of this moment, was enough to make Emperor Wen Hui, who had been assassinated numerous times, to become a bird that was startled by the mere twang of a bow. "Mother, it is better to find an imperial physician for eldest sister," Shen Miao said. "This cannot go on." Luo Shuiyin then recovered to her senses and frowned as she looked at Ran Wanyun. Shen Qing was in such pain, but as a mother, Ran Wanyun did not think to find a physician for her daughter. She did not know how this mother was doing. Immediately, Luo Shuiyin bowed to Emperor Wen Hui. "This official's wife earnestly requests your majesty to summon an imperial physician to take a look at Qinger's illness and solve the crisis." When the words were said, Shun Qing had not even spoken when Ran Wanyun screamed, "No?" Everyone's eyes landed on Ran Wanyun. When Ran Wanyun spoke, her heart knew that it was not good. Facing so many probing eyes, she forced a smile and gritted her teeth. This official's wife. This official's wife is saying, how can Qinger trouble the imperial physician? Do not spoil everyone's mood. This official's wife will just bring Qinger down. What are you talking about? Luo Shuiyin said seriously, "Nothing is more important than one's life." Could it be that you as a mother feel that Qing'er's life is not as important as the banquet hall? Everyone's expression was very strange. Looking at the current situation, it seemed that Ren Wangyun, who was the biological mother, was not willing to look for the imperial physician, and Luo Shuiyan, as the Shu, was enthusiastically concerned about Xin Qing's life and death. At the male side of the banquet, Shen Gui stared at Ren Wangyun with a heavy expression. He could not wait for this mother and daughter pair to not have any relationship with him. If Emperor Wen Hui was unhappy because of this, what would happen to his future career? Eldest Shen Foran is right. It was the Empress who lightly spoke. She glanced at Ren Wangyun. Eldest Shen, young lady's injury is more important. The returning banquet is not as important as one's life. Ren Wangyun's heart panicked. If Shen Qing was seen by the physician, wouldn't the matter of the fetus in her womb be exposed in front of others? She said, "Nyang nyang," or "I'm fine." Shen Qing's forehead was oozing big drops of sweat, and her complexion was as pale as paper. It was obvious that she was in extreme pain. She clutched her stomach and was unable to speak, but she knew that she could not let the imperial physician come over, so she suppressed the pain and said, "Eldest sister, this is not only related to your safety, but also the safety of everyone in the hall. If you were really poisoned, it means that an assassin had mixed in and everyone would be in danger. Even if you do not think for yourself, you should think for His Majesty." Xin Miao's calm voice sounded. Chapter 182. When she finished her words, Emperor Wen Hui's gaze became somewhat serious. Xin Qing almost vomited blood from Shen Miao's words. What else could Xin Qing say? Could it be that she dared not to think for the emperor? The few princes of the Fu family also heard Shan Miao's meaning. Prince Li paused for a moment before saying, "This young lady of the Shun family is born with a sharp mouth. Someone come." Without any hesitation, Emperor Wen Hui said, "Go and invite the imperial physician." Something happened to the young lady of the Shun family in the palace, so naturally Zhan must investigate clearly. Eldest sister must also not move. Shen Miao lightly said, "Perhaps the murderer is mixed in the crowd at this moment. When the imperial physician arrives, he will take eldest sister's pulse here, else one fear that there will be a problem if the blood flow is affected." Ren Wangyun did not have time to speak when Emperor Wen Hui nodded his head. Correct? With a single sentence, he had sealed off all possibilities. To let the imperial physician examine Shan Qing in public meant that the matter of Shan Qing's pregnancy would be exposed in front of all the civil and military officials. Thinking of this, Ren Wangyun's body could not stop trembling, and her fear finally spread to Shen Qing. Shen Qing endured the pain, and her heart was filled with even more fear. "Mother, don't." But what could Ren Wangyun do? Emperor Wen Hui had already spoken, and she could not defy the decree. She was just a woman and naturally could act unreasonably in the inner courtyard. But in front of the emperor, empress, and hundreds of officials, Ren Wangyun was at a loss. She raised her head and looked towards Shen Gui's direction, hoping that Shen Gui would help her, but when she met Shen Gui's eyes, there was only blame and anger. In a moment, Ren Wangyun's hands and feet turned cold and her heart was filled with despair. She did not even bother to comfort Shen Qing, who was in her embrace, and only slumped to the ground absent-mindedly. "What is wrong with your Shen Qing?" Feng Ning whispered to Shen Miao. "Why does she look like she is very afraid?" Shen Miao smiled and Luo Shuiyan also frowned. Ren Wangyun's abnormal behavior made her feel somewhat strange, but he could not think of any reason, so he looked towards Chen Roqiu and Shen Yu at the side. Shen Yu was frightened by Shen Qing's appearance and was somewhat flustered as she grabbed onto Chen Roqiu's clothes. Chen Roqiu also stared at Ren Wangyun motionlessly. After being Ren Wangyun's sister-in-law for so many years, Chen Roqiu naturally knew that her second saw had always been able to deal with all kinds of situations with ease. There could only be one reason for her to lose her composure today, and that was that she had fallen into a trap. Shen Yu whispered, "Eldest sister would not really be poisoned." "Mother, is it fifth younger sister? You are—" Chen Roqiu sternly stopped her and could not help but look at Shen Miao, who was at the side. Separated by a few people, one could not see Shen Miao's gaze, but seeing that the corner of her mouth seemed to be slightly raised, Chen Roqiu could not help but be shocked. Her intuition told her that today's matter was definitely related to Shen Miao, but was Shen Miao really so daring to poison the palace? But no matter what, Shen Qing's reputation could no longer be preserved. Prince Yu of the first rank's face also sunk because of the sudden change. Even though his actions were absurd, he was able to distinguish the priorities, and this was definitely not a good time to mention the matter just now. A sarcastic smile floated on his lips. Today Shen Miao managed to escape a calamity, and no matter if Shen Miao was the one who poisoned Xinqing, Shen Miao's thoughts were too simple to be able to hold him back. Afterwards, he could still mention the matter to Emperor Wen Hui. There were some matters that one could not escape from. The imperial physician quickly rushed over. What was unexpected was that the imperial physicians in the palace were all elderly people. Because of their rich experience, they were able to enter the Imperial Physician Academy. However, the imperial physician who came was only in his early 20s. He was also very handsome, which made some of the young ladies from official families stare at him. Chapter 183. The moment Shen Miao saw this imperial physician, her heart thumped, and she carefully sized up that imperial physician. The young imperial physician carried his medical box, and after bowing to the emperor and empress, he walked over to Ren Wanyun's side. Ren Wanyun still wanted to block, but heard the imperial physician say, "Will foreign please let go of young lady Shun, so that this one can take young lady Shun's pulse?" His voice was very pleasant to the ear and made one's heart feel comfortable. Under the watchful eyes of everyone, and with the sharp eyes of the emperor and empress, no matter what Ren Wanyun did, she did not dare to go against him. Xinqing had already fainted from the pain. She took a step back and watched as that imperial physician placed 2 fingers on Xinqing's wrist. Just as Shen Miao was in a daze looking at that imperial physician, Feng Ning's joking voice was suddenly heard. "Could it be that you also fancy that imperial physician? If you fancy him, then it is not considered that your eyesight is bad." Shen Miao was slightly startled and asked, "You know him?" "Eh," Feng Ning said in surprise. "This is the first time you are interested in the things that I am talking about. Never mind. I will also be merciful and tell you that this imperial physician is a new physician in the Imperial Medical Institution. His medical skills are amazing, and even Consort Des heart pain was cured. His Majesty valued him and made an exception to let him enter the Imperial Medical Institution. Now he is the youngest official in the Imperial Medical Institution and is very good looking. So many young ladies like him." Shen Miao said, "You also like him?" "How could I like him?" Feng Ning raised her neck. "Even though his medical skills are high and he is good looking, but at best he is just an imperial physician and does not have any family backing him. He is all alone in the world. How can such a person think of my family? Even you, although you like her, if you really want to match her, then you're still a bit lacking." Feng Ning had been pampered by her family since she was young and firmly believed that her husband was an earth-shattering person. She really did not put a small imperial physician in her eyes. "What is his name?" Shen Miao asked. "Could it be that you really like him?" Feng Ning looked suspiciously at Shen Miao before saying, "Called Gao Yang, but in the official families of the Ding capital, there is no one with the surname Gao." That was to say that this Gao Yang was definitely not from a big family. Shen Miao looked at the young imperial physician and even ignored Xinqing and Ren Wanyun. There was some fluctuation in her heart because Shen Miao discovered that this Gao Yang actually gave her a familiar feeling, as if she had seen him somewhere before. However, she had never seen Gao Yang in the Imperial Academy of Medicine in her previous life. If it wasn't at the Imperial Academy of Medicine, where else could it be? While he was thinking, Gao Yang had already finished taking the pulse. When he turned back, he met Shen Miao's sizing gaze and was slightly startled, but he quickly recovered and cupped his hands towards Ren Wanyun. "Imperial Physician Gao." The Empress opened her mouth. "Is the young lady of the Shun family poisoned?" Gao Yang looked at Xinqing, who had fainted, and then looked at the pale Ren Wanyun before cupping his hands in greeting, replying to your ladyship's words. "The young lady of the Shun family was not poisoned and only drank the clear lotus tea." After a pause, he continued, "The clear lotus tea that young lady Shun drank was not poisoned, and young lady Shun was also not poisoned." "Oh?" Emperor Wen Hui looked at Xinqing. "Since she was not poisoned, then how could it be like this?" replying to your majesty. Gaoyang sighed, the clear lotus tea is cold in nature, and there is no harm for ordinary people to drink, but for a pregnant person to drink it, it would affect the fetus. The young lady of the Shun family is already pregnant. The young lady of the Shun family was already pregnant. When the words were said, there was an uproar in the surroundings. Shin Gui opened his mouth and his face turned purple in a moment. He suddenly looked at Ren Wanyun, and the latter was paralyzed on the ground in a daze. Good. The one who spoke was that Wei family foreign. She suddenly stood up and did not care where she was and pointed at Ren Wanyun as she scolded. You are engaged to my Wei family and actually want my Wei family to marry a used shoe to raise a son for others. Ren Wanyun, do you still have any face? Chapter 184. The surrounding people became even more noisy because of Wei Foreign's words. Some time ago, the marriage between Shen Qing and the Wei family was spread in an uproar, and today she was diagnosed to be pregnant in front of all the civil and military officials. What kind of logic was this? A virgin girl was actually pregnant. Was this an illicit affair? She even wanted to marry into the Wei family with her body? Since the ancient times, it was considered a great wonder in Ming-Chi. Ren Wanyun still did not move. Her entire body seemed to have lost its strength and only half crawled to Shin Qing's side and held her in her arms. Shin Foreign, Bingong also want to know what is going on? The Empress said coldly from the high seat. Even though Ming-Chi was considered to be open-minded about the matters between men and women, but to get pregnant before marriage and have an illicit affair was a matter that would throw the family's face. Once it was discovered, one would be drowned. The Shen family was the head of the Ming-Chi's official family, and even though Shin Gui's official position was not as high as Shin Xian's, it was not considered low. The higher Shin Qing's status was, the worse the impact of this matter would be. The Empress was in charge of the 6 palaces and could not bear to see such dirty matters. Almost everyone could hear the coldness in her voice. Ren Wanyun only felt bitterness in her mouth and was unable to say a word. What could she say? Could she say that Shun Qing did not have an illicit affair but was raped? But no matter what, it was a fact that her innocence was ruined. As for Prince Yu of the first rank, she could not say a single word. Prince Yu of the first rank was a person who haggled over every penny, and if one were to bite him, one feared that there would be no good fruit to eat. If Shin Foreign does not speak, then let young Lady Shin speak. The Empress' eyes suddenly turned sharp as she instructed the palace maids beside her. Go and wake young Lady Shin up. Bingong has something to ask. Ren Wanyun was shocked, but the palace maids beside the Empress had already walked forward. Their actions were very fast, and Ren Wanyun did not even have time to stop them before the 2 palace maids violently pinched Shun Qing awake. When Shun Qing woke up, her abdomen was still in pain, but she heard the Empress coldly asking from the high seat, Shin Qing, Bingong ask you, who is the father of the flesh and blood in your abdomen? When Shun Qing heard this, her body stiffened and she looked towards Ren Wanyun for help. In a moment of desperation, Ren Wanyun shook her head at Shin Qing and told her not to speak nonsense. As for the future, Ren Wanyun would think of a way to rescue her. When Shun Qing saw Ren Wanyun shaking her head, she did not understand her meaning but did not dare to speak carelessly, so she stammered, This official's daughter. This official's daughter. She could not say it no matter what. Shin Miao sighed softly and said, Eldest sister, better say it out. Now that one has committed a serious crime, and since there is such an ending, one cannot let you bear the burden of this life alone. Ren Wanyun looked at Shun Miao fiercely and could not wait to tear Shun Miao's mouth apart. Shun Qing's body trembled and her eyes were filled with terror. The meaning of Shun Miao's words was that she would not be able to escape death. Between life and death, Shin Qing did not care about anything else and suddenly shouted, No, no. My child belongs to His Highness the Prince of First Rank. The child in my belly is the flesh and blood of His Highness the Prince. Today, it was really a wave rising before the first splash had even calmed down. A good returning banquet actually involved so many things. Prince Yu of the first rank. Everyone looked towards Prince Yu, and the latter narrowed his eyes, but his expression was very gloomy when he looked at Shun Qing. Qinger, do not talk nonsense. Ren Yuan rushed over to cover Shan Qing's mouth, but words that were said were like water that was spilled out and could not be taken back. Shan Qing's eyes widened as she stared at Prince Yu. Her thinking was very simple. Since there was an illicit relationship with an outsider, premarital pregnancy was a necessary ending, but as long as the child in her belly was Prince Yu's flesh and blood, then it would be related to the imperial bloodline. In this way, it would be equivalent to having a life-saving talisman. In any case, the emperor would not order the execution of his own nephew. Xin Miao looked at Shan Qing and felt it was somewhat funny in her heart. She could roughly guess what Shan Qing was thinking in her heart, but she had forgotten that there was a trick in this world called, "Get rid of the mother but keep the child." In the inner palace, this trick was never tired of being used 100 times. Did Shan Qing really think that with that little bit of flesh and blood, she would be able to live safe and sound? It was just that she would die faster. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.